July 20th, 2024. This is I.C.A.C. Unpacked. I'm Norman Michaelation. Well, I thought I would give another story here, an I.C.A.C. Unpacked attack. Um, this is about Mark, who is in Utah. And the interesting thing about Mark in Utah is he falls into a classification of people caught in these things who are um, impaired. They either are high or they're drunk or something of that sort. And he is in his 50s, and this happened in 2020. And after drinking for quite a long time all night, um, he listened to some people who were using the app Whisper. And apparently, a lot of people were hooking up on Whisper. And even though he was married, he was merely curious, he was drunk. He wasn't intending to meet anybody, but he wanted to find out about all this kinky fetish stuff that he kept hearing people talk about. And so he goes on and he sees an ad that says, quote, who wants to chat, like 18 female, that kind of thing. But the age was adult. And remember, this is an adult dating platform. So all of a sudden, after several messages in typical I.C.A.C. format, uh, the police officer responds, I'm only 13. Is that okay? And he said, I immediately flagged the post as underage, and I went out, did some work in the yard, and drank a little bit, had a couple cigarettes. And the name of the ad was Jenny Boo, he remembers. And he remembers it because when he came back in, there was another uh, hit on his account, if I remember the story correctly, and it said Jenny Boo again, but this time it says when he responded to it and said something like, "What are you doing here?" Um, this person said, "I'm 14-year-old female," and he said, "Well, wait a minute, you were on before 2 hours ago, and I cited you and reported you, and you were 13." And he asked, "Oh, are you two girls?" Because he said, "I know that you guys are just playing games here and that you're an adult." And he said that repeatedly throughout. And this is one of the problems that certain men get into. They want to be the, I don't want to say the tough guys, but they want to go after these, cops because they hear that these cops do that kind of thing, or they hear predator hunters are doing them. And they want to just say, hey, I know your game. The problem is when you do that, you get reeled in because it doesn't matter what you say. The fact that you're engaging with police anyway matters, and that's where they arrest you and charge you. And if you think I'm wrong, go in, look at some of these cases because the cops will say, "Oh no, you have to do something, dispositive." Yeah, not really. You don't. Because they will weave the narrative around you. That's what they did with me. That's what they did with others. And again, no sex talk. Doesn't matter. So here he said, well, what do you, the Jenny Boo character said, uh, no, I'm just me. And he said, well, are you two girls? No, no, no. And he said, I think you're law enforcement sting. And the response came twice, well, you're weird. So it went back and forth. Of course, that was a strange response. And of course, what some of these men do, like Mark, is they continue to pursue it. And again, there's no sex talk. Ask what, I'm reading my notes, excuse me. So he asked what game you were playing. And he said a real person wouldn't keep doing things like that, wouldn't keep saying weird things like that. So, you must be some kind of a fake or persona. But again, this is a fetishist platform as well as just a generic hookup site. And he had heard that people were playing these games. And he has a knowledge of um, law enforcement, if I heard correctly, and he knows some of these predator groups. And he says, kids would, he told the person, kids would use emojis or abbreviations, and you didn't do any of that stuff. So he says, you're not a real minor, and you even responded too quickly, and real minors take their time. And I can tell you as a teacher that certainly is the case. Sometimes you can't get an answer out of kids when you're standing right in front of them. Um, so he said, uh, if someone wants to meet, they usually give information. So you just are playing games, and he blocked the person, and he flagged it and reported it again. Okay, he was sure. I asked him. I said, "What about this? You know, why did you continue this?" And he says, "I was sure it was a sting or some kind of predator group, and I was tired of these guys, and I was drunk as well." He says, "I assumed that would be enough to block them." He said, "I went, back out a cigarette, a couple more drinks." And he says, I was obsessed with wanting to be right." And that's, something I've seen several times. Now, the police will say, no, this isn't true. And yet, at the same time, remember, this is an adult hookup platform, and he's not exchanging any sexual talk. Okay? So he goes back on there again when he comes back into the house, and he says he sees looking for fun, 18 female. So he said, this time the persona asks, would you be interested being in a public place for oral sex? Okay, and the response was, I'm 13-year-old female. I'm sorry, he says that to the persona just to see what they would say. So he suggests that that's a mistake. When you're proposing sex, that's a felony right there. And of course, he's saying this is an adult platform. Remember, he responds to looking for fun, 18 female. Of course, as soon as he does that, the response is, I'm 13. Now remember, he gets the age response after he suggests oral sex to an 18-year-old. Legal maneuver. But of course, the police will turn that around, won't they? So he says, if you're 13, fine. He says, you keep telling me these strange things. He says, I think you're the same person. And, you know, let's see it. Where are you at? Where's your address? And I'm, the person says that they are interested. And he says, and they ask him repeatedly, what are you interested in? And he says, well, that's up to you. He said, I said nothing back sexually. Okay, so after he learned the age, he said nothing sexually. Recall what police tell you. They say, oh, well, after you learn the age, you propose sex. I didn't do that, and he didn't do that either. Several other cases I told you about also didn't do it. That doesn't matter. Okay, it should, but it doesn't matter. So what the police are doing is they're scooping people up, they're manipulating the circumstances to make it appear that you propose sex. The problem is if you engage, if you are concerned about a young person, as I was, if you engage because you want to basically screw with these people, it doesn't matter what they're, if you're on a gaming platform and you're just talking smack, or if you're a fetishist and you just want to get off by asking, sexy questions, all of it they can use and twist around to create a conviction. And they're doing it all the time. You don't believe me? Look into it yourself. Okay? Because I'm getting tired of hearing from trolls who keep telling me that I don't know what I'm talking about, but they will not look into it fully. They just simply want to be right, sort of like Mark here. Okay? And he said, let's see, he says, uh, they asked, would that part of fun involve oral? And he doesn't indicate he's interested. And after a while, he said, well, yeah, maybe I'll just watch. And he was pushing them to reveal their true identity. Okay. And again, he says, I just want to screw with them. So at this time, a family member comes back, and the family member blocks him. And so he takes the family member's car, which is not his car. And by the way, he doesn't have any blocking apps, he doesn't have VPN or anything on his devices, which I really urge people to get to mask your identity any way you can, particularly if you're on these sites. Why? Because you never know who you're talking to. That's what the police say. You never know, so you need to protect yourself. Okay. He said he goes, let's see, he went to the address, he parked across the street, and it was some kind of an apartment type complex. Okay. And he said, I said, why did you do that? And he said, I wanted to just sit and watch. So they asked for a picture, and he sends a. I just grabbed a picture off the internet of some random guy. Okay. And he says he gets a picture in return of a young girl. Okay. And he says, he asks them to come on out. He says, I don't believe you at all. And they go back and forth a while, and he just pulls away from the curb and goes. And as he's driving off, police pull up, and he is a woman runs out of the apartment who's clearly much older, much bigger, clearly not underage, runs down the street, and he says to himself, yep, I was right, it was an older woman. Okay. And then the sheriff pulls him over. He's arrested. They pulled weapons on him. He explains that he was intoxicated, and they put me in an unmarked truck, he says, while they searched the car and took pictures of it. He says the later in the interrogation, the police officer comes in with his phone, his keys, and a pink kid's iPhone, and says, after they read him his Miranda rights, they tell him that he intended to have sex with this child, and that this phone here, this pink phone, was the child's phone. Okay. The cops keep telling him he should confess because nobody will believe him. This is the third time I've heard this in just the last 2 weeks from somebody. The police tell him he should confess because nobody will believe him that it's a sting. They admit it's a sting. They admit it's fake, but they said, hey, they're going to believe us because we're cops, right? Typical. Okay. They were running Jenny Boo, the persona in this sting, but they claim, as they did with me and with many others, that this was a real person and that they were called out because the kid was in harm's way. And he tells them because he knows something of these things and he has friends who are in law enforcement. He says, this is all bullshit. He says, I'm not writing an, oh, they wanted to write an apology to the kid. He said, I'm not writing any apology. They badger him. So finally he writes an apology. He says, to the fake parents of the fake Jenny Boo. He says, uh, and he says, of course I wouldn't put her in harm's way because she's fake. They don't like that. And they end up carting him off to jail. Okay. And obviously he shouldn't have talked because he was intoxicated. But the video that comes into discovery has doesn't have the part with the Miranda rights in it. It doesn't have the part where he's saying he's intoxicated several times. Okay. And when he goes to jail, um, which is about 3 hours after they interrogate him, he is at the legal limit, 0.08, which means he was well above the legal limit when they were interrogating him. Okay. He was in jail for 4 days and without being charged. Well, that's illegal. A maximum of 3 days without being charged is Utah law, apparently. So his attorney got him released because they were violating his rights. Okay. It took 6 days total for them to actually apply charges, which was solicitation of a minor and attempted kidnapping, two felonies. Okay. His hearing on the evidence was in May of 2022, and they dropped the kidnapping charge because, of course, you have to have a kid to kidnap. Okay, but they threatened to add it back, and this is what cops do: rack, pack, and stack charges. Add it back if he pressed the fact that they did an interrogation without the Miranda rights. So there again, cops and prosecutors cheating to win. Okay, they offered him a plea, misdemeanor, but being on the sex offender registry, which is interesting because Virginia does not have a sex offender registry for misdemeanors. So there was a trial by jury, and none of them were his peers. They were all LDS people, he pointed out. And he was convicted of solicitation in the second degree, and he's on, he thinks, the lowest tier of the sex offender registry. He was sentenced to 210 days, which is fairly standard sentence for that crime. Okay. And it's interesting, again, the policeman on the stand says he doesn't recall that this man was drunk. Police always have a convenient memory loss. They can remember things 15 years ago, but oddly enough, when it makes them look bad, they just don't remember anything. Okay? And they didn't remember he was drunk, and they claimed that they had no records of any of the pictures that they took because they used their personal phones, and immediately thereafter after they download them, they delete the information at the end of the shift. You'll recall yesterday I mentioned Millersville, Tennessee, and the video it produced. They made the exact same claim. They downloaded pictures, gave them to the predator group, the vigilantes, and then they deleted them from their personal phones, which seems reckless at best and dishonest at worst. How are you going to use that evidence in court? Well, of course, police don't have to worry about that because they're almost always believed. Okay. All the conversations on text vanished except the last one, which was incriminating, the one about oral sex. That one somehow got saved, but all the others got erased. Interesting, right? Well, he's appealing his conviction, which is why I'm not giving his real name here. But they claimed also, interestingly enough, I.C.A.C claims that it gets all of his pictures from sworn officers. But actually, while they were booking him, the cop was bragging to one of the fellow officers that they get their pictures off of Getty Images or something, quote, off of Google. So this is just, again, another opportunity that police use to lie repeatedly, to destroy innocent lives just so they can rack up charges. Again, was this man a public safety threat? Was this man attempting deliberately, knowingly, to engage with minors on an adult platform? Was this person someone who police should have spent so much time building a case about when they could have been on the deep web, the dark web, dealing with trafficking across state lines, dealing with diplomatic immunity as a cover for trafficking and all the other areas that cops tell us that real trafficking takes place? And the answer is they go for the low hanging fruit. They want to build a case. They really don't care as much about public safety as they claim. This is I.C.A.C. Unpacked. I'm Norman Michael Asian.